Okay guys, what we're doing today is we're making a dispersal device for a chemical called permethrin. Alright, the first thing we're doing with this is we're making a plaster base for it. And this is, you can just use some iodized salt, just like put a little bit in. But I always use salt to expedite the curing of plaster. Okay, now we're just going to dump some of this in there. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm going to put this aside and let this cure. This formula is 25 parts potassium chlorate, 45 parts TPA, which is terephthalic acid, 14 parts powdered sugar, 50 parts permethrin dust, and 6 parts magnesium carbonate. Now what I did is I multiplied that ratio by 4 and ended up with 100 grams of potassium chlorate, 180 grams of TPA, 56 grams of powdered sugar, 200 parts permethrin dust, 24 parts magnesium carbonate. The real reaction is occurring between the potassium chlorate, the sugar, and the magnesium carbonate. Okay, so what's happening, this is the fuel here, this is the oxidizer, and this is essentially the regulator, right? So the potassium chloride is the oxidizer, which accelerates the combustion of the powdered sugar. And the magnesium carbonate, when it undergoes combustion, it decomposes and releases CO2. The CO2 slows down the rate of this reaction. Now, the TPA, terephthalic acid, is a visual marker, right? It has a very high optical density, and it maintains that optical density. In other words, the smoke will stay for 28 minutes. It maintains optical density. Obviously, if the wind is blowing, it will disperse. The permethrin dust is just a passenger on this whole reaction. So the permethrin dust is a passenger. The TPA is a passenger. The permethrin dust is at 50 parts, which is the highest ratio out of any other thing, out of anything else in this reaction. It's a fairly slow and easygoing reaction, but it leaves a thick cloud of smoke, and almost all of this permethrin dust is atomized during this process. You'd never want to blend oxidizers and fuels in the same blender. So we got my little magic bullet here. We'll put the potassium chlorate into the magic bullet because it's highly hygroscopic. So it absorbs water from the air and then it cakes up. And in order for it to mix intimately, it needs to obviously be broken up. So we're going to blend this in this little magic bullet. And then we're going to combine all of these other ingredients into my Ninja. Magnesium carbonate. Oh, by the way, this is gymnast chalk. Magnesium carbonate is super, super fluffy. It's very low density, but it comes in bricks, basically. Permethrin dust, powdered sugar, TPA, terephthalic acid. Now what we're going to do is combine them we're going to mix the oxidizer and the fuel in a giant Ziploc bag, a 1 gallon Ziploc. Okay. Alright, so now I'm going to zip this up, just put some air in there, zip it up, and then shake it like this. We want to finish the combining of the oxidizer and fuel in a bag where it's safe, not in a blender. Alright, so we're taking our cylinder, which is cured now, and our big bag of chemicals, and filling this up loosely. We're just going to tap the bottom for longer than you think because it does keep settling. All right, now we got this ramrod, and we're just gonna compress it slowly. This is a dead blow hammer. It's full of weighted beans. And it prevents rebound, hammer rebound. But a regular hammer is fine. A rock is fine. No hammer at all is fine. So now we're just making some more plaster. And we want this rim on the inside to be clear of dust because we need the plaster to bond. All right, so see how we've cleared that off on the inside rim? Mm-hmm. We want to take a little water and just wet it. All right. So now we put this plaster into the top of the compressed composition here. Oh look, magic plaster. It multiplied.
You're stupid.
Okay. All right, we'll let that cure and then come drill it. All right, so now this plaster has cured and we're just gonna drill. This is a 5/8 inch spade bit, paddle bit, whatever you wanna call it. And drill slowly.
Okay.
That's what I'll say.
Aren't you already through it?
Yeah, but so this is interesting because okay, now the reason we drill this all the way down to the bottom is explained in this awesome video. We have a centralized hole which serves as a chimney shooting smoke out of the device. If we were to ignite the composition from the top, as the composition burned down the tube, the smoke would have to pass through the ash matrix created as it burns down. This matrix acts as a filter that we don't want. As the smoke passes through that matrix, the chemicals we are trying to disperse get filtered and trapped inside the tube. Conversely, if we ignite the composition from the bottom, the smoke generated cannot pass through the solid composition above it. This forces all the smoke to pass through the open center hole and out into the open air for dispersal. We have a fast burning visco fuse, literally zip tied to a storm match. Okay, that goes down to the bottom of this device and then it'll come through a hole in the side. That's the foundation of what we're doing here. So the reason we're using fast burning visco is so we can bypass the center section of this compressed composition of this for the device. We want it to ignite from the bottom, as you saw in my amazing flipbook video. So the first thing we'll do is simply break this little guy. We want to minimize the debris that is in this hole because anything in there will be on fire and shooting out of it, which in wooded areas you do not want. Keep in mind this is a dispersal device. Okay, so the permethrin dust in this video represents basically anything you want to put in there. That you could substitute the permethrin for, say, irritant powder for insects or colored dyes. So we're going to be drilling through the plaster layer here this way. Okay, I will get a nice little ball right here. We're going to want a little bit of slope on that hole to allow for the bend in the fuse without it being kinked at 90 degrees. Okay, so I cut this visco fuse down to size. Here's how you measure. Shove the end of the fuse like so, 90 degrees. You want it to come right outside of the body here, right? So I'll say before I go further into this ignition system, now that we have it drilled already, if you want to stop here and just get a visco fuse and zip tie it to a storm match, that's okay. You can skip this whole part. The reason I'm showing this is because this smoke device has a wide variety of uses, and some of them may be tactical or simulation, whatever. And some of it's just for fun. Actually, almost all of this is for fun, really. It's like, you got a bug problem out, you just throw some dust around or put it in a blower. The other thing is I will show you how to load this into a blower, a leaf blower, which is actually probably the most effective way of dispersing this stuff. So anyway, here we have this visco fuse in a storm match. Now, I would recommend adding a DlY or using a slow burning visco fuse and then zip tying it with 2 zip ties to a fast burning. Just so you at least, if you're not going to do this cool ignition, at least you have a bit of a time delay. So the end of this fuse is primed with the ignition composition from these kits. I'm just going to throw a plug in here real quick. I sell these online. They are the pull string igniter kits. You have these cool cups, cool syringe, potassium chlorate, the ignition composition, everything's pre-measured out. You just got to put the potassium chlorate into this, stir it up. Put in some PVA glue, which is right here. Clear glue. It's either Dacron or satin cord for making these things. We have the striker composition. We have a few assorted tubes, and then a upholstery needle for threading these cups. Anyway, just my plug. These are essentially kits for grenadifying things, okay? It is a pull ring, pull string, pull wire, whatever you want. You can add safeties to it, like you'll see, like a cotter pin or a hitch pin. Anyway, so that's what we have here are these little cups from that kit. So I'm going to thread this primed fuse through this hole. Yeah. Gonna come out over here. And now that is all lined up, and then we push it back. To about that depth. It's a little clumped up in there. So now the reason we prime this fuse is because the time fuse that we're going to be using here, what we're going to do is cross match it. You'll see that in a sec. So it ignites. It has a higher probability of it igniting this fast burning visco fuse, okay? So each inch has 2.4 seconds of burn time to it. And, we're going to probably want a little bit of time on this thing. We'll go, how long is this going to be? Who knows? This is going to be like 12 to 15 seconds, I'd say. Oh, I will use this one. This is a PEX cutter, Milwaukee PEX cutter. It's great for cutting fuses. When you cut a fuse, you want to use a single-edged razor, whether it's a utility blade, in or outside of a utility knife, or, something like this, a PEX cutter. You do not want to be using scissors because there's 2 blades which, can strike and potentially ignite or create a spark or additional friction that's not wanted. All right, so we have this section of time fuse. We want to make a punch through the middle of this powder core. Now we run this fuse here, this primed section, through that powder core, that hole. Okay, so that section of this fuse is too thick. So I'm going to trim this a little bit. And this should fit. Okay, so I'm going to make I'm going to go here. I'm just cutting this little cardboard tube. This is a Mason bee tube. I guess bee tubes are becoming, they're trending. Now we will take one of these ignition cups, which have already been made. This is a mixture of, it's called H48 compound inside of this. And then there's a striker compound on the tip of this Dacron core. And this has red phosphorus, ground glass, and
sulfur.
This cup ignites by mixing the red phosphorus and the potassium chlorate in the ignition composition. So anyway, once this cup lights, you know what, I'm just going to show you. So we take this cup. Now I need to take another tube. We're going to push this through here. All right, so we're pushing this ignition cup into this pyro tube. Oh my goodness. Okay, so that's in just a little bit. What I'm going to do now is compress this. I'm going to punch this a hole right here. Now, note that there is a flat side and a concave side. We're going to take one of these grommets. We put the flared side in the convex side of the tube because it's easier for the other end of this to be flared out when it's on a flat side. So we take these grommet pliers or whatever they are, and we put the nipple end on the flat side, and that, see, it wraps that metal around, so that'll be a lot stronger like that. So now we're gonna take this, a Q-tip is the best way to push this cup down, but you do not want to pull it by the string, obviously. I'm gonna be using this pellet pen thing. Okay, so now we're taking this primed time fuse and we're putting it into this ignition cup, this tube here. We're going to use CA glue, super glue. This is a gel super glue. I prefer, this is Tight Bond, but I prefer 2P10 for the record. You know, they should sponsor me. Seriously. Much with that. All right, so that's one layer. When you're putting time fuse into these ignition tubes, I always do 2 layers of CA glue because I have had in the past with shorter time fuses, the hot gases will come out and just jump straight to the fuse. So I like to double it up and be super careful about that. Make sure that it's fully sealed. Okay, so this is ready now. As we take one of these key rings, we put it over this so that it's coming over this grommet hole. And then we tie. A constrictor hitch is essentially a clove hitch with an additional overhand knot in it. Okay, so as one of 3 knots discovered in the last... What is going on here? Oh, Jesus. Give me a fucking break, dude. Okay, good. There it is. So I want to tighten this a little bit. It's one of 3 knots discovered in the last century. They're discovered. Knots are discovered because they are already existing mathematical pathways, essentially. So they say technically a knot is discovered and not invented. But anyway, you get the idea. You can tie it here around this key ring, and I always hit it with CA glue because it just is extra insurance because it likes to come undone. I should get a CA glue tattoo, 2P10 tattoo. And then you can put a hitch pin through that hole there, through the grommet hole, or a cotter pin. Oh boy! Oh, this is a big one. This is too much, but I guess it'll work for now. So this is the safety, right? So there's a great little ignition system for a 15-second or so time delay for a smoke device. And so now this is primed. Put this through here. I'm going to squeeze the core just to kind of agitate it and maybe loosen it up a little there. I put a little dab of CA glue between the Visco fuse and then I also do it on top of this powdered core to hold that, because this part of the fuse, the time fuse, doesn't really matter. But it prevents unnecessary sparks, and it also contains that powdered core, helps keep it intact. All right, so now that goes in flush against the body of the device. And then I hit it right here. I'll tack it in place there. Let that sit for a sec. Okay, so this is the device. This is one cool way to make a pull pin ignition on a smoke device. Oh, you didn't taste it? Sorry, Bobby. Yeah. Okay, so this is a grenade. The other option is just to use this cylinder and then put it in this device, which I'm going to show you now. All right, so this is a modified leaf blower. I added a 4x4x4Y, a 4x4 extension, another extension, and a 4x end cap. Inside, this holds a canister. The end cap is held in by 2 hitch pins, and it's a pull string igniter to ignite the fuse. So once this gets going,